Many of us on the line are aspiring business owners, but to leave your home country, your home state, your family, and actually start something in another country, that's like taking it to another level. So we need to know, you know, how did you, what did you do? How did you do it? And you say they love you. You can go in and you don't have a reservation and they moving tables. We need to know how that works.
Well, hello everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on this platform and having this conversation with me. Uh, I am a global lifestyle entrepreneur. It's a title I made up. That's what I always say, so that people could understand what I did. And it really is just, I've created a life that really allows me to be a bridge for Black people around the world, whether it's through travel, whether it's through creating businesses. And it has taken me very far. I started out really traveling at a very early age. My very first trip and passport was to study abroad in Russia at the end of the Cold War. And it changed my life. It shifted, I think, my direction forever. It made me global in a way that I don't even think I could have imagined at that point. I went on to study at NYU, study in Italy, and live in Italy for 5 years. I'm actually in Italy now, back in Florence, and looking at all the changes, a place that I lived in for 5 years and seeing 20 something years later, what it's like. And I have started out again, and once I moved back from Italy, um, as event coordinator, and so I did a lot of event marketing. Worked in the music industry during college, and then I opened a salon, and that salon turned into a skincare line, which turned into a fashion line, which turned into a beauty line. And I started traveling all around the world to manufacture and produce. And that really just led to travel. And my customers really wanting to travel, and me creating one trip a year, which turned into 8 trips a year, which turned into a full-fledged business. And it's really taken me all over the world. I get to take Black people everywhere. It's wonderful. I get to create community around the world. Since then, I've lived in Anguilla. I've had 2 boutiques there on that island. I always credit Anguilla with kind of saving me. After Trayvon Martin in the United States, I was really done, and I left. And I went to the Caribbean. I studied at the University of West Indies, and I lived in Anguilla. I had 2 boutiques there, and just moved on from Anguilla back to the United States. Continued to run my beauty business, build the travel, and then we got to a place where I was always meeting people, always creating new opportunities for myself. Met a guy on a plane that was like, "I want you to, think about coming to help me with this palace that I have in the Sahara Desert." And I was like, all right, that sounds like a good idea. Led me to the desert. I stayed there, and I actually left at the very beginning of COVID on purpose. Lived in the Sahara Desert with my daughter in Hamid Wasteland, which is about 50 kilometers from Algeria. And that led into now really like watching what was going on in the world during COVID, watching George Floyd from abroad. It was a lot. And watching Black people suffer, I think, in these very interesting and terrible ways. I came back thinking that I was, packing up to move back to Morocco, and got stuck and was like, well, I'm not going to stay in the US, and ended up creating the Black Freedom Colony. And the Black Freedom Colony was, if you guys remember all the Black folks going to Tulum during COVID, it was this really wonderful experience where I thought maybe a few people would travel. People always wanted to travel. I knew that people would travel with me. I had built a strong business, but 98 people expatriated with me. Ended up taking over an entire apartment building and really starting the beginning of building community. I think I had always had that in my heart, and really wanted to always use the world to create these new opportunities for people to just know that life is expansive, the world is there, there's places to be. And the Black Freedom Colony gave me a lot of hard lessons, a lot of beautiful lessons, and that has led into another year in the Sahara after the Black Freedom Colony, and then now my now husband, who I also met during the Black Freedom Colony, and I purchasing a hotel in Morocco and running a Black centered community. And so we have this amazing estate that we have three different levels of business running. One is a retreat center. We host 40 retreats a year. We've been doing that for the past 3 years. And the other is we have several investors, about 90 something investors over everything that have invested in 16 bungalows that we have on the property. And the third phase of that would then be to buy up the property around us so that we can start creating long-term housing, so that we can really build a community, specifically for the diaspora that's interested in living on the continent of Africa, living in community with other Black people, or just having another alternative space to be on the continent. So this is where I've landed after, all these different varied experiences. And the interesting thing is that everything I've ever done has landed me here. There's a spa, there's a there's hotel, there's travel. So, God has really uh, taken me through a journey, and I trusted that journey, and here I am.
Wow. I have so many questions from what you said. So many questions. So you are definitely, you fit that title fits you perfectly. Okay. Global and entrepreneur. You gave us a little with regards to the diverse business set that you have. Um I wanted to start with this man on the plane that invited you out to the Sahara Desert. Um, what did that conversation look like? Did you approach that conversation as a because I was having a conversation with our host, and he was saying he was asked the question, if you met, a multi-billionaire, what would you ask them? So this chance meeting that you had, did you approach that meeting as an entrepreneur, as a business person? Is that how you entered the dialogue, or did you just, were you dialoguing as just two fellow travelers and it morphed into this business opportunity?
Yeah, I don't ever really approach life from business perspective. You
Right,
know, I feel like I really like that I have authentic connections with people.
right,
And sometimes those authentic connections lead to these amazing
right,
random opportunities for me,
right,
right? Um, I'm not a networker, you know.
right,
I'm a
right,
relationship builder.
right.
And I realized something today actually. I'm really kind of taken in Florence, and I'm here in Italy and kind of just reliving. I went to see a friend that's in hospice that we grew up together as a kids. I was here for 5 years, like those first stages of adulthood. And I realized like I'm not a traveler. That's not what I am.
Right,
Those people take trips, and that's great. I want people to take trips, go places. I'm not really a nomad, right?
right,
Nomadic people just kind of move around, and
right,
I realize like I'm a migrant. I
right,
come and create space and I build community, and I think that that's just kind of how I approach life and
right.
relationships. And he was fascinating. This guy, Muhammad Spy. He'll love that I said his name.
Mhm.
And he was fascinating, and we became good friends, and a 10-hour flight felt like 2 hours because we literally talked from beginning to end. And And I don't even think, I thought anything of it. He told me that he had these things, but girl, people say, I got a palace in the Sahara. Like,
Right.
okay, you know. I've
Right.
also seen luxury on nomad tents. So, I'm like, oh, we'll see
Mm,
about that. Right.
mm,
But I thought he was interesting enough to build the
right.
relationship.
Right.
And I like sincere,
Mm,
authentic connections. And I
right.
think that we had that. And it just actually ended up being a palace. And so here we and so here we are, and very good experience. Like, you know, who can say a little black girl from Texas is 50 kilometers from Algeria running a hotel, right? Like
Right.
I had men that have never worked for a woman before, let alone
Right.
a little black girl with hats, like it's just
Mm.
this was new to them, right?
Right.
And I actually hadn't been in that town for like 2 years. And I just went like 2 weeks ago, a week ago. I took some people down. And everybody in the town was like, "Where did you go? We missed you." So and even here, like I'm seeing friends. I'm seeing
Mm,
people that I built community with, that we have memories with, that I'm nervous about, like that I care about their life. I'm watching their children grow up, and I can say that I have those communities that I've built in Bali, in Vietnam, and all over the world, Ghana, Cape Verde. I can name so many places where if I walked into this space, there are people there that
right.
know me, and
Right.
so no, I didn't approach it from a business
Right.
perspective, but I always see the money, honey. I always
Right.
see business. I will always see what the business is. I'm very clear that there are always opportunities and things,
Right.
but it isn't what leads me. It's not a if there wasn't any, I would have been equally as interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to open up to my co-host, Sister Tara. Welcome, Brother Abdul Hakim.
Warm welcome to you, and welcome, my sister. I'm intrigued, just like Sister Sylvina was and is, But the question I wanted to ask you, because I was looking at property in Morocco for a long time myself, and it seemed like the perfectly located place geographically that had all of the cultural diversity that could hold me, and a place to seek refuge and a place to get quiet. So, what was your real attraction, or what do you think the real draw for you was to actually be basing yourself in Morocco?
Mm. You know, Morocco is a real community in the truest sense of the word, right? People share. They have systems that are built into how they live. And the longer you're there, right? I don't even think I realized when they had let me into that community, right? But these systems that are created are really beautiful to me, right? I wanted to be in Africa. I think I always knew, even as a little girl, I used to say, "Oh, I'm gonna die in Africa. I'll be in Africa one day." Like I knew it when I was a little girl,
Right.
and I spent a lot of time in West Africa. I even got a lot of criticism for ending up in Morocco, and that's a whole nother conversation to have. But over West Africa, um, but what I can say is that after 25 years of being in West Africa, I have not built the kind of community. I have not had the kind of support that I've had in Morocco. And I do think that I've realized that I like Islamic Africa. There's something about Islamic Africa that functions differently. I equally like I like Senegal as well. I think it isn't as strategically positioned as Morocco is for me and for what I see as a place for people to settle. Morocco is also so from a strategic perspective, right? And I think that these are the things that kind of come after it. One, I feel good there. I feel I feel people love to see me coming in Morocco.
Right.
People give me, reverence there that I wasn't experiencing in other parts, and that it wasn't transactional.
Right.
And I felt I was getting very heartbroken about transactional relationships in Africa. And so it felt good. So that I think that that's the first part, right? And then the second part, when you start to really, like I always tell people as they're thinking about living, particularly on the continent, you know, there's this idea of kinship is a falsehood. There's no kinship ties to you in Africa, right? As a diasporan.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll get all kinds of pushback on that, but I'm ready for you. I could definitely go in on what that means. And I'm okay with that. We're a new thing, right? These diasporan lives are new things, new tribes, new people. And it still means, I still think Africa is a better place for you to be. I still think that I feel better in Africa. I feel more alive in Africa. I feel more at peace, and at ease in Africa. But I'm not in Africa looking for these authentic, like kinship relationships, right? I understand myself as something different, and I'm looking to live in community in Africa.
Right. One of the experiences I had when I went to Gambia and went to Ghana and then went to places like Morocco, I found in Gambia and in Ghana, like the work that needed to be done to bring the country up to a basic level was so insurmountable that it would take generations to bring things up to a basic level where the basic standard of living would be tantamount to an average country, say in Europe or even in the various states in states in America. And what I found with Morocco, it had passed that threshold where you could actually go there and have some continuity about the standards that you were accustomed to without
Absolutely.
having to be in this wealthy part of town, right? You could pretty much go to most of the cities and you could, correlate your standard of living, where in different parts of Africa, you'd have to go to like, where is the main hotel, right? Other
And
than that, you're
yeah.
compromising what you're accustomed to in in Europe or in the US. How did you find, or how do you find that when you go into different parts of Africa versus a country, say, like Morocco? And what would you advise, because I'm getting a long-winded way around my question, right? But I hope you're grabbing the pieces.
Got it.
Because for me, you have to have, everything starts with leadership for me. And the way how you see countries in the UAE developing so quickly is the leadership. The leadership love their own people. They might not love anybody else, but they love their own people. And as a
Yes.
result of that, the standard of the average person who is a citizen is up there. Immigrants and whatnot could be down here, but the average person who's a citizen is up there. And it's the same. But I find in Africa, the average citizen is in the worst condition of any of the people in their own country. And that is very heartbreaking to me because I know that cannot be fixed in 5 years, in 10 years. It seems as if it's a generational thing that's going to take us 100 years to get it to where it needs to go. And we have to clear out a lot of leadership, and a lot of my mentality where rather than enrich another country, and live your best life outside of your own country, to now start changing the mindset that we can enjoy the best life if we leave our resources here in our country. So how do you navigate all of these variables?
There's two parts to that. One, I want to be careful because there are amazing parts of Africa that are equally as developed as Morocco, but that I think have a variety of different issues and problems, but that you can have a very high quality of life. Morocco, I believe, is a leader on the continent for creating a high quality of life. And I absolutely think that you're right, that when you're looking, you have to be strategic and you have to kind of give up these fairy tale utopian ideas of Africa and say, where can I honestly live at the same standard of life where I can have the type of education that I want for my children, the safety, and of course the leadership. And Morocco's this particular king is absolutely phenomenal. He's a Pan-Africanist. He has a clear direction, and I feel good under his leadership. And I think that it makes it very different. He also absolutely loves his people, but I think that there's another thing. As an American, we're pretty anti-aristocratic. You don't even realize that about yourself as an American until you really are challenged with these ideas of hierarchy that Africa has. And I've grown now to kind of figure out myself within this space, but I'm realizing that a kingdom is also very interesting. One, I think it's a more natural form of governance for Africa. And in this space of a kingdom, you don't have the money grab and the power grab in a very short period of time because he owned everything. They none the grab, right? You know what I mean? Like this is a very interesting point, right? Like so, and he loves his people, and Moroccans are definitely managed with a pretty hard, iron fist, right? But he has a very strategic plan of action for making sure that Morocco is successful. Also, Morocco is extremely revolutionary in this time period. This king is very diplomatic in a very interesting way. I mean, you have a Muslim nation that has aligned themselves with the U.S. and Israel, which seems crazy. But if you're trying to get the French off your neck, it's absolutely fundamental, right? You need to have alliances with superpowers that make sense. Simultaneously, he's still not going to vote for you to, be bombing on Palestine. So he has this very interesting kind of give and take of how it goes. But I think one of these things is democracy for me has always been a fallacy, and I think that it being from the U.S., I've always seen the play that it's not real. And so I feel like it's almost more authentic living in this kingdom because it is what it is, right? And instead of it being corporations running a space, right? It is a person who loves his people who wants to be loved back. I mean, that's a part of kingdoms, right? Like
Right.
you want to be loved back by your people. And I think politically and strategically, it changes the way that you're able to move through the world and through and organize your country. So I think that there is something very specific about Morocco being a kingdom, not having this false democracy idea. I mean, obviously they're a democracy, right? Like they have systems of government, and there's all of these things, but there's an ultimate power, and I think as long as that ultimate power works, like Africa you can't get. I don't even understand why they're trying to take on 4 8-year terms. You can't fix anything in four
Right.
8 years, right?
Right.
It doesn't work for Africa in the
Right.
state. But here is what I will say. I think that they're like when I'm in a place, one, because I've kind of given up these racialized identities. And if you can do that with Africa, and you can start to understand that Africa doesn't have racialized identity, right? So there's not a universal blackness in Africa. And
Right.
so looking at it that way will hinder you from seeing Africa fully,
Wow.
right? And so when you're making these decisions about where you want to live, being strategic about what it is, all those things become very important. I want water, I want internet, I want all the things. I want it
Right.
all, right? And so you have to say, okay, let's take this strategically. This place offers me that. These people are Africans. 80% of Moroccans are Berber Amazigh people, right? Like, and that's even complicated. A lot of the criticism that I got about doing Mwasi in Morocco was, oh, these white Arabs. And I'm like, no, baby, these are just Africans with the same issues that you have, right? It's no different than light skinned Black people in Martha's Vineyard. Or, it's all the same. We got all the same issues to deconstruct. We got all the same issues to work on. But the difference is in Morocco, there's this intentional resistance, and they took the French out of their national lexicon. They've added Amazigh back into the court system. This is the place where you want to be on the continent, right? Where there's an energy of resistance. And it doesn't, Africans are Africans. So whether you're with some light skinned Africans or some dark skinned Africans, you want to be with people, right? You want to be where people are moving towards in the direction that you want, the freedom that you want to see, the independence that you want to see. And then ultimately, I mean, if I'm honest, right? Like, you know, in Morocco, people will literally move tables and cancel other reservations to fit me in. In West Africa, people will trip over their feet to serve white people before me.
Right.
So, you end up, I think, and everybody spiritually is connected to different places. For me, I'm from Texas, and I feel better on a camel than a horse. I don't know. Maybe it's, life
Love it.
experience. I don't know. But those are, I think that while I do want to be careful about acting as if there's no other spaces in Africa that have this stabilized life, because I think that there are, right? I think that Morocco is a leader in this, and for very specific reasons. And I'm personally extremely happy to be within this space, and I feel super supported, right? And so, you end up and you need to be in places where you can move forward. And lastly, I think around that same question, coming from the United States where you live with an institutionalized racism, I always tell people, like, that's the thing I don't like. If you tell me you think I'm ugly because I'm black, or like, you don't, the boy in the market calls you a nigga. I don't care about those things. Can you pick up my bag and take it where I needed to go? Like, those things are silly to me, right? But when you create obstacles that are
Yeah.
institutionalized, and you don't allow me to do the things that I am capable of doing, that's what bothers me. And one thing I can say about Morocco is, if you're smart and you have resources and you can create access for yourself. And I always tell people, now you take false limitations off of me, I'm gonna beat you every single time. And in Morocco, I'm able to push forward to do all the things that I wanted to do, that I would at every turn have obstacles in the United States. And for that, I mean, even in West Africa, right? Like, I've had obstacles every turn trying to do the things that I wanted to do. And so Morocco has offered me a level of freedom, and I think a reclamation of just my overall humanity. I don't have racialized experiences in my everyday life. Now, not to say that there's no anti-blackness, but like I said, anti-blackness, you know, I mean, really, you know,
Right.
what do I care? Right? Like, at that point. But I don't have institutional blocks. And I think that that's super freeing for me.
Very good. So just before I bring in Sister Tara, I'm just going to take a little more liberties with my privileges. So I'm going to max them out to the fullest. Because one of the things I find with us as a people, we know our environment, our immediate environment where we were born and raised is not working for us. But we stay until our body stops working. Okay. So, how important is it for us to reach a stage where we are compelled to travel and go and examine options? How important is it to all those who are on the line, those who are listening on other platforms, and those who will listen to it? How important is it, sister, for us to pack up or take the courage and go and see what other pages there are in this world? How important is it? And how important is it to make moves to fulfilling your ultimate destiny?
Mhm. I mean, for me, it's life or death. I don't think that humans weren't meant to be stagnant, right? Like, no, nomadic migrant spaces is how humanity has always existed. City states is actually what created most of the problems that we have, right?
Right, right.
Overpopulation, food shortages, this is not how humanity works. But I think primarily, and I often have, a very specific perspective as an African American. But I think it could be true for people anywhere, particularly and primarily Black people. Um, I always say, you go where the love is, right? You go where where you can fulfill your full humanity, where you can be your most grand self. And when you're pushing up against the grid, I remember when I first started traveling, my grandma said, "But baby, you don't know those people." Those people, right? And I understood her, right? Like, this is what you know, this is your family. And I'm a Texan. We got, it's deep, right? We have 165 acres of land. My family are 7 generations. We feel connected to land and the ownership of that land and what it means historically for our family. But it's always so interesting to me because we have all this land, and you still have people struggling. Why? We could be farming. We could be there has to be a recalibration of how we understand what's important. We need to be doing things that we've often either connected to slavery, or we've allowed slavery and institutionalized racism and all the other obstacles to block us from having these opportunities. um, but here's what I do know. Primarily as an African American, the level of cultural capital that you have in the world, it outweighs any amount of money and education you could ever have. And when you know how to utilize cultural capital, and you have cultural competence, when you know how to talk to people, how to respect culture, how to do all of the things that you need to do in order to be accepted on some level into these communities, the opportunities are endless. You don't stay and fight within something that's meant to kill you.
Right.
You just don't do that, right? You go to places that you can live, you can grow, where their love is, where you can expand. And I mean, I'd like to think that, over the course of this short little life that I've lived, I've been able to help people see themselves more expansively. And I hope that I can do that until the day I die.
Wonderful. Sister Tara.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My sound was not working properly, but alhamdulillah, I have it working now. So thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Sister Tanesha, so far it's been wonderful. You all know I get excited, but my question, I wanted to talk about this Mwasi Healing Center that you have. Now, I know you have a lot of businesses. I know you're doing, I told them you're a trailblazer, you travel the globe, you've been doing all these wonderful things. I want to know about this healing center, and I also want to know about the process of starting your business there. Many of us on the line are aspiring business owners, but to leave your home country, your home state, your family, and actually start something in another country, that's like taking it to another level. So we need to know, how did you, what did you do? How did you do it? And you say they love you. You can go in and you don't have a reservation and they moving tables. We need to know how that works.
So, I mean, it's so Morocco is not the first place that I've built an international business. It is probably one of the most complicated places that I've built an international business. I'm learning as I go along and making mistakes like people do. There isn't a blueprint for me. I'm doing things that they don't even have laws for or systems for, that are being created as I create, right? But basically, I've always already had built a very strong travel business. People, I was doing 8 to 9 trips a year, taking Black people around the world. Every trip was booked within 10 hours before COVID, right? And so that was already happening. So I think I already had an audience for this retreat space. I remember my girlfriend in 1994 telling me that she remembered me being in the dorm room at NYU and saying, "I'm going to start a commune and we're all going to live there and we're all going to raise our babies together and it's going to be wonderful." Now, Black folks don't like the word commune because I was like, not the place where you go and die. this is the place where we all live. Like, it's good stuff. But yeah, I think that I wanted to, I've always been really clear that whatever I did, my life's work is this, right? Trying to figure out how you build community that helps us heal. And I think I've gone through all the stages, right? Like, a part of being an entrepreneur is, the bag and the money and trying to figure out how you survive. And I've never really been that kind of entrepreneur anyway. It was always how I felt, what I wanted to do. When I had a salon, it was about building community. Um, and So I think that when I had this opportunity to do this in someone else's space, it gave me all of these, it gave me a lot of experience, right? How do you manage 28 men that never work for women, right? How do you do this across 3 languages? Right. What are the rules? There's so many mistakes that I made, but I think because I had been traveling for so long and I had been really learning how to have a deep level of respect for culture and cultural competence, it allowed me to learn the rules really quickly and to be humble enough to see when I was making these mistakes and faux pas, which I still make, right? I'm still learning how to do this thing, right? But there were things that in the desert, I thought I was being so wonderful to people. I cleaned up their living quarters. I felt like they were living dirty. Like, I couldn't believe that they were living like that. And I got everybody all of these mattresses, and we had all these mattresses. Like, and I was like, everyone's going to have a mattress and everyone is going to have the sheets. And the people were like, no, the sheets are for the clients. And I'm like, it's okay. We got enough. The sheets are going to be for everybody. You guys are going to have sheets too. And I remember I painted everything and got everything clean. And I went back in to kind of check on how things were going. And all of the mattresses were up against the wall and they had rolled out their mats because nomads were working for me. Like, they didn't want to sleep in a mat on a mattress. Like, it was, and I had to remember, like, oh, okay. The cultural competency comes in. You have to remember that what you think is a standard, what you think is what people want, is not necessarily what it
Do you enjoy our content? Well, make sure to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you won't miss an episode.